Coming up on The W Show, Brisbane are premiers for Season 8. We dissect how the Lion Queens came from behind to defeat the Kangaroos. Plus, we'll bring you some exclusive interviews from Icon Park as Craig Starcevich's team revel in their glory. And we look ahead to the trade period as well as the draft. Gettable host Riley Beveridge joining us on the couch. This is The W Show thanks to NAB. Yes, a very warm welcome to The W Show thanks to NAB. Sarah Olle in the host chair and back as she is every week for the final time this season. It has been a long season indeed. Award-winning journalist Sarah Black. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Sarah. We've made it.
We have made it.
And what a grand final.
What a grand final. We will dissect that soon. But doing the dirty double, we've got Gemma Bastiani, who's on the couch, and also a little bit later doing the deep dive. Hi, Gem.
Hello. It's good to be in this part of the studio.
Looking forward to having a chat with you. And as Sarah said, the only place to start is the grand final. Of course, the Lions 17-point victors over the Kangaroos. More than 12,000 turned out to Icon Park for this spectacular grand final, Sarah. It's the Lions' second from 5 grand final appearances, their second premiership. What a team. If you looked up consistent in the dictionary, you're seeing a photo of these Lions.
You certainly are. They're just time and time again, they've proven us all wrong. Doesn't matter who's on the park, they've got a structure, they've got a system, they've got a belief that they're the ones who will triumph. It was a wonderful grand final, Jem. We saw twists, turns, injuries, heroes, comebacks. It was everything you could want from a game of footy, let alone a grand final.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And it was everything because we had a period of very little scoring and then it opened the floodgates in the last one. Jenna Bruton obviously injured, all those sorts of things happened, but the Lions, they had to do it differently this year and I think that's what makes it a bit sweeter for them, Sarah.
Well, let's talk about how they had to do it differently because they really had their backs against the wall as we see Craig Starcevich get the Gatorade shower. In slow-mo, indeed. Because they lost the likes, we've spoken about it, of Jessie Wardlaw, Greta Bodie, Em Bates and of course Kate Lutkins who had the pregnancy scare. Everyone had kind of written them off and during the season they had some ups and downs, losing to teams like St Kilda, Richmond, Collingwood, the lesser lights. It didn't look at certain stages like this would be possible.
Yeah, certainly. They made it hard for themselves, I think it's safe to say. They also learnt a lot out of those losses. So the Richmond one was in round one. You sort of, round one rustiness, that's okay. Collingwood one, they were inaccurate. The St Kilda one was where we all got a little bit worried. That was sort of round 8, round 9, and there was a serious chance they'd miss the top 4. But what they did was prove themselves against the best of the best. They've got a perfect record over Melbourne, Adelaide and now North Melbourne this year. And so they're the rightful premiers.
And we saw Craig Starcevich get that Gatorade shower, Jem, but he had to make some tough calls during the year, and I'm referring to Jade Allinger and Poppy Bolts and having to drop them for disciplinary reasons. So they had some things go against them throughout the season, didn't they?
Yeah, and Sarah, you wrote a fantastic article, talking with Jade Allinger about how it set the standard for the club. This is the professional standard at Brisbane. But I think the other thing is, spoke to Phil Lovett, their forwards coach, after the game, and he said after that St Kilda loss, which is their biggest loss since round 1 of season 6, so the start of last year, it gave them a steely resolve, and then after that they didn't look back. They kept winning after that, so it was a bit of a turning point, I think.
We'll talk about setting standards. I'll tell you what, the Brisbane girls can set the standards in the party department because look at this after the grand final win. I mean, fair enough, Sarah and Jem, you're allowed to let your hair down a little bit, but look at them go. They're having an absolute riot.
Yeah, this is one of my overriding memories of last year. The last time Brisbane won the grand final was seeing Clark Keating, who was the defensive coach at the time, wearing Kate Lutkins' jumper drinking out of the Premiership Cup. That image has stuck with me, but it looks like things have gone to a new level there. That's a CEO, Greg Swan, up on the shoulders partying away. So, they're well and truly enjoying it, and it probably goes, Jem, with that Poppy Bolts and Jade Allinger decision of, this is a standard throughout the season, this is how things will be, but once the season's done and won, all bets are off.
You're allowed to let loose when you've won a flag, right, Sarah?
You absolutely are. But let's go to the scenes post-flag triumph because it was such a special day at Icon Park and we're going to hear exclusively from some of the stars, including a pretty fired-up Belle Dawes.
Two-time premiership player now. I think I'm just soaking up the moment. I'm still a bit in shock. And yeah, anything from the last time, I know that this moment doesn't come around often, so I'm just going to soak it up and enjoy it and hope it lasts forever.
Olle, congratulations, a two-time premiership player. How does that sound?
Oh, amazing. I was saying earlier, it wasn't like that last 12 months ago against Melbourne. Still was with a lot of us, so to get back to winning again is just an amazing feeling, and so proud of all the girls.
Oh, pretty surreal at the moment. I think it'll take a little bit of time to really sink in, but yeah, amazing. I'm just, absolutely beside myself.
Is it all sinking in just yet?
Oh, I don't think just yet. Hey, I'm like over the moon, so excited. I can't believe I've got two of these nows, and to win it again, it was a bloody hard-fought game, and, you know, credit to North, but credit to my girls for getting over the line. I'm so proud and so happy to get this again.
Yeah, there was an incredible moment, Belle, just down in that pocket.
Yeah.
You kind of spun around, pushed off a player and hit up Dakota Davidson. It kind of changed the momentum of the match. Talk me through that moment.
Yeah, it definitely felt like that. Like, I know personally I wasn't getting my hands on it. I was trying to talk to the girls and then saw the footy and I'm like, this needs to go into the forward 50 in the middle. So I was just kind of like, nah, see ya, we're going back in. And Dax just seems to clunk my kicks when I kick it. So, it was good. It was a turning moment. I'm happy she clunked it.
Back home in Ireland, when we play with our county, we have to play with them. There's no real changing around. So I was 20 years old when I came out here, and first time living away from home. And Brisbane really are my second family. I say I have 30 plus sisters and a few mums and dads extra here with the club. So they make it feel so much special, and I think that's why these days are just amazing.
This is, I think, by far has been our best year, and to win it with the amazing group we have is just so special.
Talk to me about your skipper, Bree Conan. She led from the front today, best on ground. What does she mean to you?
Oh, she means the absolute world. She leads from the front, but also the way she plays, you know, she inspires each and every one of us, and she kicked the clutch goal at the end, and that kind of secured the win for us, and it was just an amazing feeling.
What does Craig mean to you?
Everything. He's like a second dad to me. He's been there the whole time, and I just couldn't imagine anybody else at our helm.
So Bree Conan, full of emotion, the best on ground after the 17-point win over the Kangaroos. I tell you what, though, I had to almost get out of the way when I was interviewing Belle Dawes because she was going absolutely choppo, just reliving that moment on the wing when she hit up Dakota Davidson. But as you can see from all the girls, I mean, Olle O'Dwyer from Ireland, there were so many great storylines across the entire team, wasn't there, Sarah?
Yeah, well, speaking of Ireland, Jen Dunn, less than 4 months ago, won a flag with Dublin in Gaelic football. She came out to the country 2.5 weeks before the season started, and now she's a premiership player. So, you know, and Jem, there's people like Lily Postlethwaite.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good stories in there.
Yeah, Lily Postlethwaite is a huge one. She did 2 ACLs. She missed their flag because of an ACL back in 2021. She's there celebrating with them in her polo rather than with the Guernsey on. So to see her get that. But then there's other players like Bree who had to step into that captain's role, had to make that concession speech this time last year, and now getting to do it with the best on ground medal. There's a lot of great little threads to pull.
I'll tell you what, though, I'm just really happy for the city of Brisbane. Our producer is a proud Queenslander, and she wanted to point out that it has been a very unhappy 12 months in the Sunshine State. Look at all the teams there that have made grand finals and fallen short at the last hurdle. So thank goodness for the Brisbane Lions just changing the luck up there, sir.
Yeah, well, you could argue they kicked it off. They were the first loss this time last year. That's why we're saying 12 months rather than calendar year. They kicked it off last year with the loss, and, you know, that's how it all progressed. And hopefully for the city of Brisbane, they've just managed to sew that up again.
So let's get into the nitty-gritty of the game, Gem. And there was an injury early in the game. It proved to be a pretty pivotal moment because this is Jenna Bruton going down with an Achilles injury in the 3rd minute. And last week we were singing her praises as the best on ground. She turned the game, I should have said, in that prelim against the Crows, particularly in that 3rd term. And she took no part essentially in this match.
Yeah, I think a lot of the talk has been they lost her run, you know, they run out of gas towards the end of the game, and having one rotation down, especially someone who can rotate into the midfield, was a big loss. But I think the bigger part of that loss was she has become that high half forward that sends the ball inside 50 and traps the ball in attack for them. And losing that, you saw that those inside 50 entries kind of started to fall away. They weren't as smart as they could have been. They were taking a bit too long to send it in. So they really lacked her really precision kicking inside 50, and by the end of it, they just weren't able to make best use of their forwards as a result.
Could the Roos have won, Sarah, if they still had her in that final term? Because we saw they really ran out of legs.
Yeah, they definitely would have used her in and around the ball as well. It's one of Jenna's strengths, is that she can play forward and through the midfield. She's such an agile and quick player that maybe that turn of speed was just what they were missing in and around the contest. And also just to give some of those mids a bit of a chop out as well. So it was an absolutely brutal blow. As you said, only 3 minutes into the game.
When it comes to the best on ground, though, it was unanimous. Bree Conan, the Brisbane skipper, awarded that medal. Now, our very own Gemma Bastiani was one of the members of the media who voted on this. In the end, unanimous 3s to Bree Conan, Gem. But what caught your eye when it came to her performance? Because for me, it was a game of 2 halves. Starting in defence, you can see intercepting at will here, and then deployed into the midfield post-half-time.
Yeah, so she's always been a defender. Early in her career, she did play a bit midfield, but we know her as a defender, and she was kind of keeping her structure behind the ball, so she became a spare intercept marker, essentially. So she's kind of intercepting everything that comes in and repelling it back out. But when they needed a physical body around the ball, when Kathy Spark actually hurt her knee in the first half as well, we knew that Bree would be the one that they'd turn to, Sarah, because in round 4 she did the same thing, didn't she?
Yeah, so it was a move that North Melbourne knew could come, especially if Jazz got off the chain, as she did back in round 4 and as she did to start the grand final, to have a bigger body, just so that someone is a bit more mindful of Ghana. And it worked to a T. And then Bree capped off the game with the perfect exclamation point, kicking that winning goal of the game.
Of course, it was such a good game, though, and for 3 quarters, really, North wore the better side. And Mia King had a massive game in the middle, particularly after Jenna Bruton went down. So let's get to our unsung heroes. Thanks to NAB. Sarah, she was sensational. She really stepped up.
She really did. And if you tracked her stats throughout the game, she started with 7 tackles, I think, in the first quarter, finished with 8 for the game, but her clearance numbers went through the roof. And I think some of that was also on the back of the Jenna Bruton injury. Things had to change a little bit in that midfield mix. We talk so much about Jazz Garner and Ash Riddell, Gemma, but Mia has really grown in confidence and in strength around that footy.
Yeah, so she kind of started her career as a small forward for North Melbourne, and last year, throughout those 2 seasons, progressed into the midfield. She's a lot stronger than maybe she looks, so she's able to apply that defensive pressure. But the great thing about Mia is that she can apply that pressure and then also win her own footy. So she kind of goes under the radar because of those other 2 there. So in another midfield, maybe she gets a bit more attention, but as long as she's going under the radar, make the most use of her.
So at 3/4 time, the Lions, they trail by 7 points. And to win the flag, they would have to do something that no AFLW side has ever done in a grand final, and that is peg back that 3/4 time deficit. And look who steps up, Sarah and Gem, Dakota Davidson. I mean, Sarah, given the spotlight she was under this week with the knee injury, just how incredible was this final term?
Yeah, it was amazing. It was just the perfect story for Dakota. She spoke post-match to a number of outlets, including our own, saying that Craig Starcevich had said to her at halftime and at 3/4 time that, grand finals are about moments and taking your opportunity. And she did that with the first 2 goals of that 4th quarter. I think what I really loved, Gemma, was that the first of those shots was taken from the same spot she had last year's grand final, but she missed last year.
Yeah, so that was the sign for the Lions and especially their coaching staff, where they saw she went back, she kicked that goal. If you look at her face, she knows that it's a big moment in the game once it goes through, but it's also a big moment for her and her confidence and their ability to roll off the back of it. And it took 6 minutes for them to kick another, but from there, Brisbane were on top and that was it. So she's the one that got them within a point and then ahead in that last quarter.
And certainly got the celebrations going in that final term. Gem, I'm going to get you up for the deep dive, and while you get up there, Sarah, I just want to talk about the Lions' fitness, because in that final term, 4 unanswered goals, and when the siren sounded, Taylor Smith runs on with a jerry can of all objects. But that feeds into a pre-season camp, which explains this fitness behind this incredible Brisbane side, doesn't it?
Yeah, it became a symbol for them throughout the year, the jerry can, the most unlikely of symbols, but it was to do with some sort of a drill or exercise that they had to do, a task maybe, that involved holding jerry cans and holding them above their heads and carrying them, and it symbolised, endurance, digging deep, and that sort of thing, and it became an emblem for them that they know that they've done the work, and they really have. They've long been known as one of the fittest sides in the competition, and they proved it again against North Melbourne, who are up there, but Brisbane are just another level again.
Could be something the W show trial for their pre-season next year.
So. No.
Yeah, not for me either. But now that season 8 is done and dusted, we turn our attention towards player movement, and the AFLW draft, it is coming up on the 18th of this month. Yes, 1 week before Christmas. Let's get to the deep dive with Gemma and the man himself, Jordan Keneal, because these are 3 faces, Gem and Jordan, that we should look out for.
We're so excited to be talking about the draft today, Sarah, and we've brought on our AFLW draft analyst, JC, Jordan Keneal,
yes,
to chat about his 3 favourite prospects for this week's draft. Who's your first one, JC?
Gem, it's got to be Christy Lee Weston-Turner. She's unbelievable to watch. She's so quick as a forward, but she's got a lot of tricks in her bag. For me, she's a player that reminds me a lot of Alyssa Bannon, so that's who you should sort of take a look at when you have a look at her vision.
Those are big raps for Christy Lee Weston-Turner. Alyssa Bannon's a pretty good player. Here are some of her highlights. What is it about what she does that you like so much?
I mean, her pace. First of all, this goal is just ridiculous. Like, it reminds me a lot of Ponce's goal from earlier this year. Not quite as good, but yeah, certainly have to get the measuring tape out. So she missed a lot of footy this year, but this is the stuff. This is the Bannon stuff. When she's running down the wing, oh, it's actually electrifying. I just, yeah, absolutely love it.
Every time we've watched this vision, you've gotten so excited about that. But it's a goal sense thing as well, but she could also play in different parts of the ground, can't she?
That's right. So here, she played a little bit closer to goal, and you can sort of play her as the deeper forward. But yeah, she can absolutely get up the field, and she's got so much versatility to her game. Now,
depending on how draft picks land, obviously trade is still to come, but the Bulldogs would relish a player like this. But, you know, Fremantle would really, you know, use that sort of versatile player that Ebony Antonio has tried to be, and he's getting a bit older, so she'd be a good replacement. Right. So she's a pretty high prospect. Who's your next one?
Next one is Brooke Barwick from Tassie, and she's such a smooth mover. Again, she's a player that's missed a lot of time this year. But, you know, someone we chatted about when we were watching her vision earlier was Mon Conti.
Yes.
And it's the fluidity to her game as a midfielder that, it's going to, yeah, be really exciting to watch.
And some of the vision you've picked out for us to watch, it does show that, doesn't it? Like, she's small, she's 159 centimetres, but she's able to move through congestion really nicely.
Absolutely. This is the stuff. Like, at stoppages, she's always on the move. There's always a lot of bigger players that are trying to body her. She's got little moves to get around. She's swimming underneath arms. She's always on the move. And, yeah, for me, just in traffic, she's definitely got that Conti stuff that you said, very fluid.
And still willing to apply that defensive pressure, which we love. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of different teams. You know, the Western Bulldogs are a team that constantly come up because they are in need of so many different things. But, you know, even like a Sydney would be good to add to that midfield, you know, a smaller body to go with the Montana Hams and players like that. But even Adelaide maybe build her up underneath the likes of Ebony Marinoff and Hatchard. But you've got a third one?
Third one is Alicia Pisano,
yes.
And this is just so much fun.
She's your favourite,
yeah,
yes.
No, she's been a favourite for a long time. Love the small forwards. She's a player that has a lot of speed, but also she can play really close to goal as your dedicated sort of nominal target. And she's such like a great finisher around the goals on her left foot. Love watching her play.
So just like Brooke Barwick, who we didn't mention is coming off an ACL, Alicia Pisano came back from an ACL as well, but she kind of hasn't missed a beat, has she, this year?
Right. It's almost like she never missed any time at all, which is crazy. And yeah, like looking at her now, she just loves to swing around onto the left foot. If you give her time and space, she's absolutely going to tear you up. And at ground level, just doesn't fumble or anything. She's super clean.
So unlike the other two that we've spoken about, Alicia has only nominated Victoria for this draft. So, you know, a Carlton or a Collingwood could be a really good spot for her, that close to goal, work off those tall forwards and be really dangerous. And which one goes number one out of those 3?
I'm not sure. I would probably say Christy Lee at this stage, but really depends who ends up getting the number 1 pick. So that'll be super interesting. I think any of those 3, you can't go wrong.
There we go. Thank you, JC. And there you go. That's a bit of a draft preview for you coming up in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much to Gemma and Jordan there, of course. The AFLW draft coming up on December 18. The only place you can stream it live is on the AFL Live app and afl.com.au. Sarah, it's always a fabulous night when dreams are realised.
I'm really looking forward to it. It's we had the supplementary draft earlier this year, which was, you know, a little bit smaller, but I'm looking forward to seeing the room, the atmosphere and the dreams of some of these incredibly talented footballers be realised.
Now, would you believe that before before we even get to the draft, we have a trade period. It begins on Thursday. It lasts for a week. So we've got our very own Gettable host in the studio to bring us up to speed. Hello, Riley Beveridge.
G'day, Sarah. Sarah, how we going?
Good. Not your first time on the W show, I don't think.
No, I thought I hosted a show about 3 or 4 years ago. I've since found out it was last year. We've had 3 seasons in that time, though. But
it was clearly very memorable for you, Riley.
No, it's been a while since I've been back here. It's good to be back.
Time flies when you're not having fun. But let's get into the trade period and let's kick things off with a former #1 draft pick in Gabby Newton. Is she heading west?
Yeah, so Gabby Newton, we expect her to get to Fremantle during this year's trade period, which starts on Thursday, obviously. #1 pick a few years ago. I think Gabby Newton's probably going to be likely to be the best player to move in this year's trade period. I think if you look at all the names that are going to move, I expect around 20 or 30 to part ways with their clubs and go elsewhere during this trade period. I think Gabby Newton's probably the best of them. She's heading over to Perth, already requested a trade formally with the Western Bulldogs now, so a trade will have to be negotiated there. I think Fremantle have pick 6 to start with, so I'd imagine that'd be the starting point in talks.
Yeah, the Dogs will be keen to pick up, something pretty significant in return for Newton. They've put a lot of time and effort into her, and she's had a few major injuries along the way. She's perfect for Fremantle, Sir. We've been talking a lot this year about how it's sort of been Anya tie or bust up in that forward line. So to have Newton as that foil to play off, Anya's approaching 30, if not 30 already. So long term, I think that's a really smart move. She'll reunite with Lisa Webb there too, who spent some time at the Doggies. So there's a pretty close personal connection there.
And Riles, unfortunately for the Dogs, it doesn't look like the only key position player to be leaving the kennel.
Yeah, I think the Western Bulldogs are probably going to be among the most active teams during this year's AFLW trade period. And Katie Lynch, who's an All-Australian defender last season, she looks to be heading to Gold Coast. She's another one that's already requested a trade up to the Suns. So the Suns are trying to get active as well. They'll get Charlotte Wilson from Melbourne, another key defender, so 2 key defensive posts filled there at Gold Coast. But it's not the only one from the Western Bulldogs, as you mentioned. Celine Moody, the ruck, is expected to head to Carlton, where she'll pair with her twin sister Bree there. Kirsty Lamb's weighing up some interest from Port Adelaide as well, so another potential All-Australian that could be leaving the Dogs. Isabel Pritchard, a really young, talented young midfielder, had some interest from Carlton and Collingwood. She's going to stay at the Dogs, though. I expect that just to be a short-term deal, so probably a 1-year deal for Pritchard at the Western Bulldogs. A few others in and around the Western Bulldogs. They'll get Zimmy Farquharson, who's at Brisbane, obviously didn't play last season. She was moved to the inactive list, but we expect her to get to the Western Bulldogs at some stage during this year's trade period. They've also got some interest in a couple of Adelaide players in Caitlin Gould and Zoe Prowse as well. And of course, they'll start with the #1 draft pick. So whether or not the #1 pick is involved in these talks amongst all of these players, I'd expect it to come up in at least some discussions, particularly if they do get commitments from Gould and Prowse simply because they're standing at the Crows. Whether or not Adelaide want the pick 1 from them, or whether or not it can be moved elsewhere, I think the Western Bulldogs are pretty open to being active during this year's trade period.
Busy, busy, busy. Now, this time last year, the D's were still very much in party mode after securing their inaugural flag. They kept the list together with the exception of Daisy Pearce retiring, but it doesn't look like, Riles, it's going to be the case 12 months on.
No, there's going to be a few departures from Melbourne during this year's trade period. So 4 players have already announced that they will be requesting trades. Casey Sheriff and Eliza West will both move to Hawthorn. We expect that to be done and dusted. Maddie Gay will head across to Essendon. As we mentioned before, Charlotte Wilson will go to Gold Coast. The other one in and amongst this is one of the W show's very own, in Libby Birch, who's got interest. She met with Hawthorn this week. They're probably the front runners if she was to move clubs. Now, because Hawthorn have already got commitments from Sheriff and West, and if Birch does elect to go there as well, I'd expect pick 5 to come into the discussion there. So the Hawks currently hold pick 5 at the draft. Of course, if Maddie Gay gets to Essendon as well, and then the Charlotte Wilson move, I reckon Melbourne could finish this trade period with maybe 3 or 4 first-round picks, which is something they haven't had for such a long period of time, given they've been so successful, given we've had a couple of expansion drafts where a lot of the established teams have been shifted back in the order. So I'd expect them to really hit the draft hard, maybe try and take 3 or 4, bundle them up, maybe try and get as high as they can in that order.
It's interesting when you break down, you look at that list and you're like, oh my God, what's happening at Melbourne? You know, the ceiling's falling in. It's not necessarily quite as bad as it seems. You know, Charlotte Wilson struggled for a game this year. Eliza West was dropped late in the year as well. You know, so there's a few things. Casey Sheriff will be a loss, as will Libby, if that indeed does go through. But like you said, Riles, they haven't had a decent crack at the draft since 2020 was probably the last time they really got their hands dirty. They brought in Alyssa Bannon, Eliza McNamara, Megan Fitzsimon during that period. So it's been a couple of years now where we've seen so many talented youngsters enter the AFLW, but bypass Melbourne. So, yeah, we'll see what it's like at the end of the whole period rather than just the trade period.
What about a star giant, Elise Parker? Yeah. Is she staying or is she going? Because she's garnered so much interest, rightfully so, from Victorian clubs.
Yeah, so she'll stay at the Giants. She's set to sign a 2-year deal at the club with an option for a further 2 years beyond that can be triggered at any point over the next 2 seasons. So that could turn into as long as a 4-year deal for her at the Giants. She had some pretty significant interest. So Geelong, Essendon, Richmond and Carlton all asked the question of her and all chased her pretty hard with pretty big offers as well. So her electing to stay at the Giants is a big commitment for that football club. I think obviously she'll want to see improvement over the next couple of years, and that could factor into whether or not that 2-year deal turns into a 4-year deal. But a lot of clubs chased Elise Parker thinking she was gettable ahead of this year's trade period. Similar situation to what we saw with Ali Morfitt at the Swans, where clubs in Victoria thought she might be keen to move over here, ultimately electing to stay on a longer term deal.
Firstly, impressive you managed to slide a gettable reference in there. Well done. If you were another club, you'd be mad not to ask the question of Elise Parker and her manager. As we know, the Giants have had a really tough trot. Elise is such a competitive player, but it's great for the Giants that she's going to be around. They need her. And also, with Alicia Eva stepping down from captaincy, Elise is the vice captain. So it'll be interesting to see whether the captaincy also figures into that decision.
And lastly, Riles, the Blues. They're fresh off their first season under coach Matthew Buck. How are things looking in terms of their list?
I think they're going to be incredibly active. So as we mentioned before, Celine Moody is going to head across from the Bulldogs to the Blues, where she'll join her twin sister Bree, both of them rucks. It's a bit of a family affair at Carlton because they've targeted a lot of people with links either currently in the AFL or AFLW or past in the competition as well. So Celine Moody, as we said, her sister's already at the Blues. Yaz Dersma, who's the sister of Xavier at Essendon at Zane at North Melbourne, she'll head across to Carlton. And then Tani Brown, who's the father-daughter at Collingwood, the daughter of Collingwood Premiership champion Gavin Brown, she'll also head across to Carlton. Mual Alawifi, though, is going to move. So she's got interest from the Western Bulldogs and Sydney. She was told she wouldn't be offered a new deal at the Blues, so she's gone out and found a couple of clubs there. So the Dogs and the Sydney, certainly the front runners there. Lauren Arends is another name to watch for the Blues. Gold Coast defender, we mentioned before that both Charlotte Wilson and Katie Lynch heading up to the Suns. She's got some interest from Carlton and from the Western Bulldogs in Victoria, so potentially trying to fill one of those key position voids down back for the Blues.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, if Mua moves out, it makes sense to bring in Arends, who is a Victorian. And Mua's also spent some time with the Western Bulldogs VFLW program. That's where she was drafted from, so I'm not surprised that there's an existing connection there.
So the AFLW draft, December 18, the AFL Live app, and afl.com.au, the only place to stream it live. Riles, thanks for coming in. That was a very comprehensive cameo.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Rapid fire, everything you need. Stay tuned to Riley's Twitter, by the way. His Twitter feed will have everything you need to know about the trade period.
Sarah, thanks to you. An incredible season.
Thank you, Sarah. We made it.
And before I sign off, I just want to thank everyone behind the scenes, because this W show does not get done without so many people. I'm just going to rush through some names. Our producer, Anna Stone, as well as Lucy, Diana, Sandy, Lockie, Campbell, Jace, Jamie, Chris, Sarah, Mike, Sarah, Kath, Mars, Milana, Harry, Chris, and of course all the W players that have come on the show, and my co-host, who is back home packing today, Nat Edwards. We salute you, and of course thank you for joining the W show. Thanks to NAB. Have a very safe and happy summer. We'll see you in 2024, which sounds scary.